Genome, The Autobiography of a Species in 23 Chapters by Matt Ridley. Picture yourself holding a book right now. But this isn't your typical paperback. This is an ancient manuscript that's been composing itself for over 4 billion years. It's simultaneously a history text, a medical guide, a political document, and an epic poem. Inside are stories of triumph and catastrophe, ancient diseases, and long-lost ancestors. It contains the complete instructions for building a human being, everything from the shape of your smile to the intricate circuitry of your brain. Here's the mind-bending part. If you started reading this book out loud, one word every second, 8 hours a day, you'd need an entire century to get through it. Yet somehow, a complete copy is tucked inside nearly every one of your 100 trillion cells. Welcome to the human genome. And Matt Ridley, in his brilliant book Genome, doesn't just explain it, he actually teaches us how to read it. For most of human existence, this book remained locked tight. We knew something was there, passing traits from parent to child, but we couldn't crack the code. We noticed our eye color or watched diseases run in families, but the actual text? Complete mystery. Only now, in our uniquely fortunate slice of history, have we finally found the key. We're literally the first humans ever to peek at our own instruction manual. Ridley's Genome sold millions of copies, and not because it reads like a textbook, it's genuinely an adventure story. He takes one of the most brain-melting topics imaginable and transforms it into a journey of self-discovery. As a trained zoologist with a journalist's knack for storytelling, Ridley figured out the perfect approach. Read this book of life one chapter at a time. He organizes everything around our 23 chromosome pairs, pulling one fascinating story from each to illuminate a different aspect of being human. So here's what I'm offering you today. Not just a dry science summary, but a guided tour into the very heart of who you are. By the time we're done, you'll understand that you're not some random pile of molecules. You're the living result of a 4 billion-year-old story. You'll discover how your genes aren't just static blueprints, but dynamic scripts, constantly interacting with your environment, and even responding to your own choices. We'll explore the genes that tell life's deepest stories, the genetic battles raging inside you right now, and the ultimate question, can a book written in our cells ever make room for free will? This goes way beyond biology. This is our species, autobiography, and you, my friend, are its most recent, most extraordinary chapter. Let's start at the absolute beginning. Not with the first human, or even the first animal, but with the first word. 4 billion years ago, in the chaotic chemical soup of young Earth, a single molecule stumbled onto a trick that would literally change the universe. It learned to copy itself. This was life's first word. It wasn't even DNA as we know it today. Probably just a scrappy, unstable strand of something called RNA. But it had discovered replication. As Ridley explains, this first word kicked off the grandest story ever told. It spread through the ancient oceans, endlessly copying itself. Across unimaginable stretches of time, it figured out how to build things, wrap itself in protective bubbles we call cells, and create order from chaos. That simple self-replicating molecule, it's the direct ancestor of every gene in your body today. Your genome is an unbroken line, stretching all the way back to life's dawn. Now imagine that genome as a book. Ridley gives us this perfect metaphor. The book has 23 chapters, our chromosomes. Each chapter contains thousands of stories, our genes, and every story is written in a simple 4-letter alphabet. A, C, G, and T. That's it. The entire complexity of a human being, Shakespeare's poetry, Einstein's genius, a mother's embrace, comes from combinations of just 4 letters. For ages, we had no clue this book even existed. Then in the 19th century, an Austrian monk named Gregor Mendel, tending pea plants in a monastery garden, caught the first glimpse. He noticed that traits like height or seed color didn't blend together like paint. They were passed down in discrete, separate units, more like shuffling marbles. He'd discovered the gene, though he didn't call it that. He realized inheritance was digital. But what did genes actually do? That mystery lasted decades. The next breakthrough came from Dr. Archibald Garrod, studying a harmless but weird condition where people's urine turns black. He noticed it ran in families and realized he was seeing one of Mendel's traits in action. Then, he made a brilliant leap. The condition was caused by a missing enzyme. He proposed that genes were essentially recipes for making enzymes. And he nailed it. That's the genome's central secret. Most genes are recipes for making proteins. Proteins do all the heavy lifting. They digest food, fight infections, carry oxygen, and form your hair. Every protein is a translated gene. The story of how we cracked this code, Watson, Crick, Franklin, and Wilkins in 1953, ranks among science's greatest detective stories. They revealed DNA's structure, the elegant double helix. This shape was crucial because it showed exactly how life's book copies itself. The two strands are complements of each other. A always pairs with T, C always pairs with G. When a cell needs to copy its genome, it simply unzips the helix, and each strand becomes a template for building a new partner. Beautifully simple. So our genome is a recipe book passed through generations. But it's also a history book. And one of the most dramatic events in our species, history, is written right there in chromosome 2. Check out the chromosomes of chimps, gorillas, or orangutans. They all have 24 pairs. Humans have only 23. Until the 1950s, scientists were so sure we also had 24 that when they counted 23 under a microscope, they assumed they'd miscounted. But we really are the exception among great apes. Why? Look closely, and you'll see that our chromosome 2 is actually 2 ape chromosomes fused end-to-end. You can even spot the ghost of that second chromosome's tip buried in the middle of ours. Somewhere in our ancestry, after we split from chimps, a dramatic fusion happened in one of our ancestors. This genetic accident was so significant it likely created a reproductive barrier. It was a pivotal moment that helped make us human. This fusion proves we're apes, descended from a long line of them. We're basically 98% chimpanzee. The differences may seem huge, but genetically they're tiny. As Ridley points out, if you were building a human and a chimp from scratch starting with an amoeba, almost every step would be identical. You'd build the same liver, 5 fingers, 2 eyes, spinal cord, and basic brain structures. That 2% difference isn't about creating new parts. It's about subtle tweaks to the recipe. Altering growth timing, reshaping the jaw, lengthening legs, rewiring the brain. Our genes tell stories not just of our species, but of individual fates. And sometimes these stories turn dark. On chromosome 4 sits a gene containing a single repeating 3-letter word, CAG. In most people, this word repeats 10 to 15 times. CAG, 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 a simple stutter in a billion-word book. But sometimes, the DNA copying mechanism glitches, and the stutter goes on too long. If you have 39 or more repeats, your fate is sealed. Midway through life, you'll develop Huntington's disease. Your movements will become jerky and uncontrollable. Your personality will shift, and your mind will slowly unravel. It's a cruel, incurable sentence written into your genes from conception. The story of Nancy Wexler powerfully illustrates this. Her mother died of Huntington's, leaving Nancy with a 50% chance of carrying the gene herself. She dedicated her life to finding it, traveling to a remote Venezuelan community near Lake Maracaibo, where the disease was unusually common, all descended from a single ancestor. For years, her team painstakingly collected blood samples and family histories, slowly narrowing the search. When they found the gene in 1993, the secret turned out to be that simple, terrible stutter. Huntington's represents genetic determinism at its most extreme. It feels like proof we're just DNA puppets. But Ridley shows us this is the exception, not the rule. Most traits aren't controlled by a single all-powerful gene. Take asthma, a story from chromosome 5. Scientists have hunted for the asthma gene for years. They haven't found one. They've found at least 15. There are genes influencing airway sensitivity, immune response, and inflammation control. Asthma isn't a simple switch like Huntington's. It's a complex negotiation between many genes and environmental triggers: dust mites, pollution, hygiene, even stress levels. This brings us to one of science's biggest controversies: intelligence. On chromosome 6, scientists found a gene, IGF2R, that appears slightly different in people with very high IQs. But it's not a genius gene. Its effect is tiny, maybe adding a few IQ points. And like asthma, intelligence results from a vast network of genes and environmental factors. Studies of identical twins raised apart are mind-blowing here. They show about half of IQ variation is inherited. But that doesn't mean your intelligence is fixed at birth. Heritability actually increases as we age. A young child's IQ is heavily shaped by family environment. But as we grow, we seek out environments matching our innate tendencies. A child with a genetic appetite for learning will seek out books, and that seeking reinforces their intelligence. Genes create an appetite, not just aptitude. Nature and nurture aren't opposing forces. They're in constant feedback loops. Genes guide us toward the nurture that best expresses our nature. This leads to the heart of human experience: instinct. For most of the 20th century, conventional wisdom said animals have instincts, but humans have culture. We learn everything. This idea, Ridley argues, is profoundly wrong. Linguist Noam Chomsky showed that our language capacity isn't learned from scratch. It's an instinct. Children don't need formal grammar instruction. They absorb it. They make mistakes like saying "goed" instead of "went," not from copying adults, but because their brain instinctively applies rules, the rule for forming past tense. This language instinct is specialized software, pre-installed in the human brain. On chromosome 7, there's evidence of a gene that, when damaged, causes specific language impairment. People with this condition struggle with grammar. They must consciously learn rules other children absorb instinctively. They're essentially people without a native language. Such a condition powerfully proves that language isn't just cultural invention, it's biological. But genome stories aren't always about cooperation for the body's good. Sometimes they're stories of conflict. Consider the sex chromosomes X and Y. Women have 2 X chromosomes. Men have an X and a Y. The Y chromosome is a tiny stub with very few genes. Its most important one is SRY, the master switch that triggers male development. The X chromosome, by contrast, is large and packed with important genes. Now think from a gene's perspective. An X chromosome spends 2/3 of its time in female bodies, while a Y chromosome spends all its time in males. Their interests don't align. A gene on the X chromosome giving females a slight advantage, even harming males, can spread. A gene on the Y benefiting males, even at females' cost, can also thrive. This creates what biologists call sexual antagonism, an evolutionary arms race between the sexes, fought at the genetic level. David Haig, a brilliant evolutionary biologist, used this idea to explain the bizarre phenomenon of genomic imprinting. Certain genes in our genome remember which parent they came from. They're marked, or imprinted, so only one parent's copy switches on. A classic example is on chromosome 15. A small deletion here causes 2 completely different diseases depending on which parent you inherited it from. If the deletion comes from your father, you get Prader-Willi syndrome, uncontrollable appetite, and obesity. The exact same deletion from your mother causes Angelman syndrome, hyperactivity, sleeplessness, and constant smiling. Why? Haig's theory suggests this is a resource battle fought in the womb. A father's genes in a fetus have one agenda: extract maximum resources from mom to produce a big, healthy baby. The mother's genes want to balance this fetus's needs against her own health and future offspring. So paternal growth genes are cranked up, while maternal growth restraining genes are also cranked up. The result is delicate balance, a tug of war. The Prader-Willi gene seems paternally expressed and involves appetite. When missing, the child can't stop eating. The Angelman gene is maternally expressed, apparently controlling activity levels. When missing, the child is hyperactive. It's parental agendas battling in a child's brain chemistry. This inner conflict isn't the only strange thing hidden in our genome. When scientists first sequenced our DNA, they expected a neat, orderly recipe book. Instead, they found only about 3% consists of actual genes. The other 97% seemed like junk. Chapter 8 dives into this junk DNA. Much of it is actually parasitic DNA. Our genome is littered with ancient viruses and rogue genetic elements with one purpose: copying themselves. The most common is a line 1 element. Over 100,000 copies exist in your genome. It contains a recipe for a protein that copies it and inserts that copy elsewhere in your DNA. It's a genetic parasite. Another, even more common element, ALU, has been wildly successful, nearly 1 million copies. It's a parasite of the parasite, hijacking line 1's machinery. Your genome isn't a pristine temple. It's a teeming ecosystem, a jungle of competing elements, with our actual genes trying to work amidst constant clamor from selfish, parasitic code. This ongoing battle, both internal and external, has profoundly shaped us. Our struggles with infectious diseases have marked our genome everywhere. The story of blood groups on chromosome 9 is a perfect example. Different ABO blood types offer varying resistance to different diseases. Type O blood, for instance, makes you more susceptible to cholera, but more resistant to malaria. That's why different blood types persist. Natural selection can never settle on a single best type, because best keeps changing as diseases rise and fall. Same with the sickle cell anemia gene. Having one copy provides powerful malaria protection. Huge advantage where malaria is common, but 2 copies is fatal. It's a terrible trade-off, a genetic compromise written by our long, bloody war with the malaria parasite. This brings us to one of the book's most powerful and hopeful stories, Cancer and a Gene on Chromosome 17 called TP53. Cancer is fundamentally a genetic disease. It's cellular rebellion. A cell forgets its duty and divides uncontrollably. The body has many defenses against this mutiny. There are genes acting as brakes on cell division, called tumor suppressor genes. But the last and most important line of defense is a gene that can order a rogue cell to commit suicide. That's TP53. Its protein, P53, has been called the guardian of the genome. It monitors cells for DNA damage or abnormal growth. When it detects trouble, it can halt division to allow repairs. But if damage is too severe, it issues the ultimate command, apoptosis, or programmed cell death. The cell dutifully dismantles itself for the body's greater good. In more than half of all human cancers, TP53 is broken. The guardian is gone, and the mutinous cell multiplies freely. Understanding this gene has revolutionized cancer research. Instead of just poisoning cancer cells, scientists are developing therapies to reactivate the P53 system, persuading cancer cells to kill themselves. The new genetics, Ridley shows, is moving beyond just understanding diseases to actively curing them. Gene therapy, replacing faulty genes with working ones, is no longer science fiction. In 1990, a young girl with a rare immune disorder called SCID, or bubble boy disease, became the first person successfully treated with gene therapy. Doctors took her white blood cells, used a harmless virus to insert a working gene copy, and infused them back. Her immune system began functioning. The journey's been slow and difficult, but the principle is proven. We're at the dawn of an age where we can edit life's book. This power brings profound ethical questions. The history of eugenics, which Ridley tackles in Chapter 21, chillingly reminds us how genetic knowledge can be twisted for cruel ideologies. In early 20th century America and Europe, flawed heredity understanding justified forced sterilization of the feeble-minded and racist immigration laws. The movement was driven not by science, but by social prejudice dressed in scientific language. Eugenics' core mistake, Ridley argues, wasn't the idea that genes influence traits, but the idea of coercion, that the state can decide who should reproduce for society's supposed good. Today, we face a new kind of eugenics, what some call laissez-faire eugenics. Through genetic screening and prenatal diagnoses, parents increasingly can make choices about their children's genes. The most common example is screening for Down syndrome, caused by an extra copy of chromosome 21. This technology gives parents power they never had before. It's deeply personal, and Ridley's point is that the essential difference from old eugenics is who decides, the individual or the state. This leads to the final, deepest question, which Ridley saves for last: free will. If genes influence our personality, intelligence, and instincts, if our choices are shaped by complex biological and environmental factors stretching back millions of years, if our moods can be traced to brain chemistry's ebb and flow, are we truly free? Ridley argues the old debate pitting genetic determinism against free will is a false choice. We're not puppets. Yes, genes are powerful influences, but they're not rigid blueprints. They're scripts we get to interpret. Consider the stress response, governed by hormones like cortisol. Your genes build this response machinery, but it's your thoughts, experiences, and choices that activate it. An external event, filtered through your consciousness, can reach into your cells and switch on genes. Causality runs both ways. Your mind influences your genes, just as your genes influence your mind. This creates feedback loops so complex they become chaotic. In the mathematical sense, it's deterministic but not predictable. Freedom, Ridley suggests, lies in this gap between determinism and predictability. It lies in the fact that our actions are determined by causes originating within us, in the unique combination of our genes, experiences, and consciousness, not by outside forces. Freedom isn't the absence of causality, it's the ability to be the author of your own causality. Our genes have given us the most remarkable gift, a brain complex enough to rebel against its own creators. We have the power to tell our genes, as Steven Pinker did, go jump in a lake. We can choose to defy ancient imperatives to survive and reproduce. We can choose to create art, seek knowledge, live for ideals. There's no single free will gene on chromosome 22 or anywhere else. But the entire genome, in its magnificent, sprawling, contradictory glory, is the book that gives us the capacity for it. It builds a creature that can learn, remember, feel, and ultimately choose. So what do we take from this incredible journey through the human genome? I think Genome's most powerful lesson is a profound sense of liberation. For so long, we've been caught in a false war between nature and nurture, between the idea that we're gene slaves and the idea that we're blank slates for society to write on. Ridley shows both ideas are wrong. The truth is far more beautiful and complex. Our genome isn't a set of instructions robbing us of freedom. It's the very source of our freedom. It's endowed us with a brain that's a learning machine, a tool for absorbing culture and consciousness that can reflect on its own existence. Genes aren't our masters. They're our collaborators. They give us our instincts, temperaments, and appetites, but they also give us the capacity to rise above them. This understanding changes everything. It means we can stop seeing ourselves as victims of our genes, upbringing, or society. Instead, we can see ourselves as agents, equipped with unique biological inheritance and lifetime experience, who have the capacity to make choices. One of the most practical takeaways is developing deep curiosity about your own nature. What are your innate tendencies? Are you naturally introverted or extroverted? A novelty seeker or someone who prefers routine? Understanding these things isn't about boxing yourself in. It's about learning to work with your nature, not against it. If you have an anxious temperament, you can build routines providing calm and control. If you're a novelty seeker, you can build a life full of adventure and learning so you don't get bored and fall into destructive patterns. Secondly, this book gives us a new lens for viewing humanity. When you understand that our genes record our shared history, a history of plagues, migrations, and evolutionary struggles, it fosters connection. We're all variations on a theme, all carrying the same epic story. Superficial differences between us pale compared to the deep biological kinship uniting us as a species. Finally, Genome is a book about wonder. It reminds us that the most fascinating mysteries aren't in the stars but within ourselves. The fact that a simple four-letter code can write a story resulting in a thinking, feeling, loving human being is the most astonishing thing I know. It fills me with awe and deep gratitude for the privilege of being alive and conscious in a universe that allows such things. That was a summary of Genome by Matt Ridley. We've explored some big ideas today, but honestly, a summary is just a map. The real treasure comes when you make the journey yourself. The true magic of this book is in those quiet moments when one of Ridley's elegant explanations or surprising stories connects with you in unexpected ways. This summary helps you decide if this book deserves your time. If anything we've talked about has sparked your curiosity, I urge you to grab a copy. Reading it is more than just learning. It's an experience that will fundamentally change how you see yourself, your history, and what it means to be human. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the world's most remarkable minds. Let's continue to learn and grow together.